Welcome back. For today's video we're heading up to the Shambles in York, which is a place I've wanted to photograph for a while, doing a specific style of photography called high dynamic range. This video will walk you through the journey there, the pictures that were taken and the process to get the effect that I'll show you now on the screen. So as you can see, it's quite a striking and bold final image, and this is exactly the effect that we were aiming for with this shot. So York's quite a long journey for us. It takes about an hour and 3/4 to get there. And as you can probably see, I have a pillion with me. My wife tagged along for this shot. The journey up was not without its troubles. The M1 was shut, so we ended up having a few detours. But that said, the DeVille did well. It's an NT650, for those who haven't seen the previous videos. And this is a bike that I've put together over the last few months from a very, very rough start to something that's proven quite reliable so far. So with Claire on the back, we zipped up the motorway no problem at all, and made our way to take the shot. Today's image was captured using the 15-35 2.8 RF lens. The reason for this is I wanted the wide field of view that the 15mm offered. That allowed me to capture plenty of the scene of the Shambles and then trim it down later. As usual, this was paired to the Canon R5, and this shot was taken with a tripod. The reason for that is because it was such a long exposure at 30 seconds, it just wouldn't have been practical to do this handheld. The lens is good with its image stabilization, but not that good. So we've got quite a few important settings to discuss for this image. First is shutter speed. By default, your shutter speed will go up to 1/8000th of a second or down as low as 0.5 of a second on the Canon R5. That is until you switch from electronic shutter to mechanical shutter. As soon as you do that, you can go back to much lower shutter speeds, and in body it will let you go as low as 30 seconds, which was enough for us. The aperture I wanted up quite high. I wanted to get a sun star effect on the lights, and I also needed to have a smaller hole for light to get through to compensate for the long exposure. f11 worked well, and the ISO was dropped right down to 100, and that made sure that we had a good exposure across the image. With f11 you get a sharp scene from the foreground right through to the background. The single shooting mode was used, so we were just taking one shot for this. And in terms of subject to detect, you could have set that to anything. None would have been fine. It was on people as it happens. And they're all the settings that we used for this shot. If you haven't visited York, it is a spectacular city. The Minster is a common focal point for photographers, and it's very photogenic. Day or night, it's a great target. This is St Mary's Abbey in University Gardens, which was also a delight. And then we wandered along the city walls, which York's very famous for. This is Clifford's Tower. People were running up and down that on the evening. And this is quite a dark shot, 2.5 second exposure, but made to look like daytime. We took a night shot of the Minster, which looked very nice. And it rained overnight, which helped with our final shot and also getting some reflections of the Minster. So this is our original image. The bulk of what we're going to do today will be focused around HDR toning. So you go to Image, Adjustments, and then HDR toning. And we've got a bunch of parameters in here that we can play with. So we'll start with the gamma setting. Moving it to the left increases it. And as we move it left, the midtones will become darker, but we will wash out the brighter highlights. So I'll show you that. You can see how the midtones of the cobbles get really dark and the lights get blown out completely. Conversely, if you move it to the right, the midtones will wash out more. It will become a flatter image. So both of those have significant effect on the artistic presentation of an image. In our case, I want to go slightly towards the flatter image. Probably only going to do that about 0.8, 0.9. The exposure I do want to take down a little bit. I want to darken it. So not too much. About 0.5 is fine. Detail is important. I want to bring out quite a lot of detail. By default, it's gone to plus 30% on the detail. I'd like to pump that right up to more like 200% and really bring out the detail. So that's 250%. You can see that gives a nice effect. Next we have shadows and highlights. So shadows, as you increase the number of shadows, they will brighten the shadows up. And as you reduce the number negative, it will make them darker. On our image, we don't actually need to tweak them too far at all. I'll go for a slightly brighter shadow. I'll knock them up to about 10% on the shadows. And the highlights, if we drag that to the right, you really blow out the highlights. And if you drag it to the left, you pull them down really low. For us, I like the starbursts I've got around the lights. That was captured due to the higher aperture. I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to boost a little bit. So I'm up 30% here to show that starburst. Okay, so I've managed to push up to 60% without blowing it out too much and really show off that starburst. Vibrance and saturation we're quite used to. So vibrance is how punchy the colours are. I am going to boost that up. So I'm bringing out the red on the left and the orangey and yellow tones. I don't want to go too far, but I do want to look slightly artificial. So probably about 50% there. The default saturation is 20%. I will push further than that. I think I got to more like 40. That's 35% and that looks quite nice. Local adaptation is the method we use, and you don't actually need to change the edge glow on this image. Okay, so we'll save that. It will then apply the HDR toning to the image, which will take a few seconds. And that's it. We've now got that as a layer that we can use. I'm going to duplicate that layer so we can make changes now. The first thing I want to do, I think, is remove this wire going across the top. I find that quite distracting in the image. So we'll zoom right in, and I'm going to use the clone stamp tool over here on the left. And I'm going to use that first to get rid of these wires going up, because if I have this terminating with nothing, it's going to look strange. So in terms of brush size, I'll be about 80 pixels is fine. And I will just press Alt and then pick a part of the image similar in texture and color. And then I will start to remove the wires from this image. I often pick different parts on the image and start cloning those in as well to make it look more natural. Now ordinarily I'm using a feathered brush so you get a soft edge. I do need to move to quite a hard edge down here and brush out around this alarm. Now I'm not too concerned about this wire here. I could get rid of that, but I don't think it will be noticeable on the final image. So you will see these appearing. These are hot pixels. So especially prevalent in long exposure images, and it's just part of the electrical noise you get in a camera's image train. It's nothing to worry about. You can get rid of them if you choose. I'm just clone stamping a few of them out as I go. They really won't be noticeable on the final picture. Now this is going to be a bit trickier. We've got two angles to consider here. We're nearly at the end. We just need to zoom in quite close and start using smaller brush sizes. So we'll do this vertical one to start with. Clean that up, which is quite an easy one. And then we'll do this 45 degree, pull that down a little further. And then we'll do this vertical. And then again, we'll make sure that's well aligned and then clone stamp around here. If at any point it looks unnatural, just hit Ctrl Z to undo it and then go again. I try and make sure I go in different directions when I'm moving the brush as well. If you continually go in the same direction, you can end up with strange striations, strange lines showing. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, not too bad. I've got a lot of foreground. I probably want to trim it somewhere around here and keep that leading line going to the edge. I I'd like these to be equal, so somewhere more like here, but I don't want to crop out that much of the image. So I'm going to pull it down much further, somewhere like maybe here. Possibly even further. I'll start further out because it's easier to take away than it is to add in later on. Okay, that'll do for that image. Okay, so that's it for that layer. Turn that off and then back on. So all we've done really is remove that wire. And a few hot pixels. Yeah, I think that looks quite natural. Okay, we'll duplicate the layer and then I'm going to deal with the sky. So the sky, as you can see if we zoom in, looks quite pixely. We're going to smooth that sky out. So the first thing I can do is select it with the quick selection tool. Make sure you don't get the buildings, especially when it's dark. It can struggle to separate what you want and what you don't want. And then we'll pull down a little bit here. Okay, I think that's okay. Now I don't really want to lose these starbursts, and I'm not going to be too fussed about a tiny bit of sky being missed, so I'm going to take that up a little bit higher. So the starburst effect is something you get by using high apertures. On this image, we were f11, I thought we were. So f11 is sort of a good go-to aperture if you want to try and create starbursts, or higher. Okay, so we've selected most of the sky. I'm going to start by just darkening it down. So levels and curves. I'm going to do curves, which is Control M, and just bring that sky down a little bit. That will get rid of most of the issue for us. So I'll just turn off selection edges so you can't see the selection anymore. So it's just made it a little darker. Do I like that on the image? I don't really mind it. Okay, I'll leave that. And then I'm going to use the blur tool. I'm going to keep the selection there. And I'm going to go to blur here. And I'm going to use quite a big brush. So 800 pixels with a soft edge. The strength I'll set to 50%. And I've got it on darken. And I'll just blur that out a little bit. Okay, so whilst that's okay, I think I can be a bit stronger than that. So I'm going to go one further to the smudge tool. Now this is quite an aggressive tool, but I think we can tolerate it on the sky. Again, quite a big brush. 50% strength this is at. And I'm just going to smudge everything. It's like a blur, but more aggressive. So I'm just going to deselect that. And then I'll turn that layer off and then back on again. You can see it's had a significant effect on the sky. There's still some texture and colour changes to it. If I run the blur tool across the image, you will see quite how dramatic those effects are. Now obviously we don't want that sort of an effect, but it can be used quite well against things like the sky there where we don't have any detail to preserve at all. So I'll play with shadows and highlights. In fact, before I do, I'll create a new layer and then we'll have a look at shadows and highlights. So I'm just going to turn everything off. Now this is just experimental, just to see whether I like the look of it. A very, very small amount, so 1% shadows. Let's check highlights. Highlights I don't mind bringing up a little bit, so I've got 13% on highlights. Okay, new layer. Brightness and contrast next, I think. Image adjustments, brightness and contrast. Now, brightness, I'm not expecting to increase. No, I'm going to leave that alone. Contrast I might tweak, so let's increase that and see what it does. Okay, so that really brings out the darks doing that. I'm just going to save that for now. 23 that was on contrast. Before, after. Okay, I think I like that, I'll keep that. New layer again. Okay, next we're going to move to selective colour. I'm expecting to pull the reds down on this. So image adjustments and then selective colour. If I take the cyan down on the reds, you see a nice warm glow coming from the image. Take that down about 20%. And it really is just a case of moving the sliders, seeing if you like the effect you're getting. So you can take this from being quite a cold image with the neutrals onto the yellow side to a really quite a warm image on the right hand side. That bluish effect is really quite nice in a lot of city urban street photography. I'm going for more of the yellowy side of things and the warm glow of sort of the Cotswolds and the Shambles, that sort of cosy image. So +10 on the yellows. Blacks I'm expected to be small changes. That's quite a strong image now. I'm going to explore cropping it differently. I'm not sure I'm going to make a change here, but I'm just going to look at what it would look like. So this keeps the blue, which I'm keen to do. It's slightly offset with its leading lines. If I bring that in, feels wrong. I do like having the lead in from this foreground. So I think I'll lose a very small amount at the front here and just finish this corner down here. Okay, so I want to finish this corner specifically at the edge of the image, so I'm just going to chop that in a little further. That's quite nice now. And then I'm going to change the colour balance. So colour balance, Control B, lets you make big changes to the whole image quite quickly. I'm interested in the darks, so I'm going to choose shadows on the tone balance. And what I'm looking to do is take out a little bit of the yellow. So I'm going to use the bottom slider and move towards blue. Now that's gone really dark. Moving it towards yellow takes it to a place I don't want to go. So although it's yellow I'm looking to take out, I'm going to try the other sliders. The green counters it quite nicely. The red does too. Either way will help. Depends on the effect I'm going for. So I'm going more of the red end than the green end for my own preference. So take that down just a tiny bit. And then the top slider, probably going to leave that fairly neutral too. Okay, so we'll clear the changes to the top and bottom slider. And I'm just going to undo that. Very small yellow change, redo that. Okay, I'm happy with that now. You can see some ghosts in the image here. So this is because I took a long exposure image. A couple of photographers in here as well. We saw them on the day. When people move around on a long exposure shot, they leave ghost trails behind them, which can be quite an interesting effect. You can see the image stands to quite a bit of zoom and preserves quality. I think that's roughly where I want it to be. I might want to bump up the brightness a little bit at the bottom end of the curve. I think I do. So I'll save that now and I'll come back to it and see if I like it in 5. Okay, so coming back to the image, it's bold, it's vibrant, it's very high in contrast, and it's exactly what I wanted. So I'm very happy with that. It's a far cry from the first image that we started with, but it looks nice. The only thing I'm going to tweak is this right hand side on the door. There are 2 spots here that you can see which look out of place. Now if we zoom in on those, I think what they actually were was raindrops on the lens because it was spitting with rain. I don't believe they were on the door. So I'm just going to use clone stamping and pull those out of the image. So I think I'm going to call that done. That's exactly the image I was after from that visit. I'll just show you the original and then where we got to. It's quite a stark transformation, but I'm happy with that one. That's the Shambles.